All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to How to Stop Hackers with Honey and Sand. Today's webinar is hosted by the Florida Bar's Standing Committee on Technology and sponsored by Legal Fuel, the practice resource center of the Florida Bar. My name is Carla Eckhart. I'm a senior practice management advisor here at Legal Fuel, the practice resource center of the Florida Bar. Today's presenter is Nick Lockard, CEO and Chief Information Security Officer at Lockard. He'll be introducing himself shortly. The webinar has been approved by the Florida Bar CLE department for 1 hour of General CLE credit, including 1 hour of Technology CLE credit. Stay tuned until the end of the presentation for the course number. If you're a live attendee, you can submit questions via the Q&A control at the bottom of your screen or via Zoom chat. If you're watching this webinar on demand on legalfuel.com, please submit questions and comments to Lockard or to legalfuel@floridabar.org. I'll now turn it over to the chair of the Florida Bar Standing Committee on Technology, Bo Blumberg, for some brief comments.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this CLE. I'm very excited about this, as I think it is something every Florida Bar member needs to be knowledgeable about and learn more about, as it is ever-changing and critical to both the practice of law and daily living in today's world. With all that being said, thank you again to Nick Lockard and Ruben Acosta for presenting this, and thank you again.
All right, thank you for that introduction. I'd like to thank the Florida Bar Standing Committee for allowing us to make this presentation, and you are going to watch How to Stop Hackers with Honey and Sand. My name is Nick Lockard. Thank you for joining. All right, to break the ice here, we're going to start off with a little joke. So out of all the lawyer jokes out there, I figured this is the most appropriate one. So I see the lawyers stop by, so thank you for stopping by. So today's topics, we're going to start with a brief introduction of myself, why you should care about this, talk about the risks, the threats, the kind of standardizing our baseline of common security controls so we're all on the same page. And we'll talk about why those are not enough. We'll then talk about and show a video of a live hacking simulation that I created. We're going to show from the perspective of a hacker and a victim. We're going to simulate ransomware and a Trojan, and to maintain persistence. So that should be very interesting and eye-opening. Everyone knows what it looks like when a robber robs a bank from the movies and stuff with a gun. Not everyone knows what it looks like from a hacker perspective. So we're going to pull back the curtains and you'll be able to see that kind of stuff. Then we'll talk about the honey and sand portion of how that could have prevented that hacker from being successful in his attack. We'll dive deep into sandboxing and honey pots, honey tokens, honey nets. Then we'll tie it all together with the defense in depth conversation with the architecture of where this all fits in. And then we'll talk a little bit about how Lockard can help provide some of these services for you. And we'll finish it up with Q&A. So I would suggest if you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section here or use the question and answer section, and we will get to them at the end of this presentation. All right, so a little about me. So again, my name is Nick Lockard. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I'm the founder of Lockard LLC. I am a certified ethical hacker, also known as a CEH. I'm an offensive security certified professional. I've been doing this for multiple different industries, both private and public in the government. I've worked with the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, the FBI, worked at Intel, AWS, and LinkedIn, just to name a few. I've been on the red team and purple team and blue teams, security engineering architecture. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the certs I have on the left-hand side. One interesting fact that I like to tell folks is I did receive an offer from the NSA back in 2014. They wanted me to join their red team to actually do ethical hacking. Well, ethical, it is the NSA, right? So, but they wanted me to relocate to Maryland and take a huge pay cut, and it just wasn't in the cards for me at that time. But it is something I am proud of. It was a 2-year process to even get that offer. All right, so why should you care? The main reason is your reputation. Your reputation is on the line. When hackers are able to target your business, they will be able to ruin your reputation if they're successful in their attacks. And this also extends to a financial loss as well, such as with ransomware. With the ransomware, back in 2020, we've seen The average ransomware demand was $847,000, and the highest demand we seen was 30 million. And comparing that to last year in 2021, we've seen a spike over 518% in ransomware demand. So the average $5.3 million, with the highest ransom being 50 million, which is just insane. And I would not be surprised if 2022 sets another record even bigger than that. The breaches that account for all of this, 85% is involved with a human element of some kind. So typically we're dealing with phishing of some kind, either an email or a phone call, and an end user falls for it, which then triggers all of this. The remainder is actual like outdated software, outdated websites that get exploited from the outside. And so as you can see, your human element is the biggest threat. And there's also advanced malware and Trojans, such as the Pegasus Trojan. For those of you that are not familiar with the Pegasus Trojan, this is targeting mobile devices, and you don't have to click on anything. All they have to have is your phone number, and they have full access to your phone, which is one of the reasons why it's very important to have a defense in depth strategy to really prevent mobile devices from conducting business, because there is literally nothing you can do to prevent the Pegasus Trojan. It is scary. They do have a Pegasus 2. This is a nation state backed tool. So the main risks here are the quadruple extortion here. And what we see is hackers will use encryption to encrypt your files on your computer, your documents, your databases, and then they will hold them ransom, demanding you pay them money, and they'll give you a key to unencrypt it. A lot of times it's temporary. Once they've got their foothold in the environment, they'll set dormant for a week or two or a month, and then they'll re-encrypt it again if the way they got in was not detected and sealed off. The other thing is data theft. Hackers have been stealing information and threatening to post it with either on the dark web or wherever, unless you pay money. The other is denial of service. And ransomware gangs will attack your public website and basically knock it down if the web server is not robust, high available to be able to withstand a large influx of traffic. And they will keep it down until you pay a ransom. And then there's the harassment component of this, which is where cybercriminals will attempt to blackmail or make up, things that are not true, but threaten to go to business partners, your employees, your customers, the media, and tell them that you were hacked, even if you technically weren't. Again, trying to get money. So all of this is financial gains on their side of what they're trying to accomplish. And so what this kind of boils down to is the risks of unauthorized access, which is the number one concern, someone that has access to something they shouldn't. Denial of service, taking down your stuff when it needs to be available. Malicious code, which a lot of times these things all start with malicious code, and then through privilege escalation and lateral movement, they're able to get to systems and data that they shouldn't have access to, and it all started with malicious code. The other is improper use, and this could be an insider threat perspective where someone inadvertently had access to something that they stumbled across, and then all of a sudden they abuse that. So your insider threat or improper use is next on that list. And then the lowest risk here is the attempted access, the scanning and probing. And this all comes together in what we call the cyber kill chain. And if you have the appropriate controls and detections in place, you'll be able to catch some of this stuff early on before it actually turns into something really bad. And that's where we can normally enumerate or detect the enumeration, scanning and probing phase of folks trying to get access to your systems and applications. So the threats. There's a lot of threats. This is just the common ones. I would highlight the biggest threat right now is definitely ransomware. A lot of times, though, ransomware doesn't come alone. It is bundled with Trojans and keyloggers. Keylogger specifically is where if something is on your system and a hacker is monitoring or was able to get that to run successfully, every time you type, the keylogger sees exactly what you're typing, whether it's your username, your password, credit card numbers, you name it. They're watching. And the other thing is the backdoor Trojan. That way they can maintain their persistence. So even if you restart your computer, they're able to get right back into it. The other big thing as well is crypto miners. And so this is really a risk toward cloud computing. So if you're on like AWS or Azure and you've got a web application that's publicly facing, or even if it's internally, but your systems have access to like an internal web app that's hosted in the cloud, if a hacker is able to get access to that, they're able to eat up those resources. And it's on your dime at that point. And they're just sitting back, mining cryptocurrencies, making money, and you're paying for it. And what that means basically is the application is going to run slow because all of the RAM and CPU and compute resources are going to be all dedicated to crypto mining. And so you're going to have a bad experience and you're going to have a really big bill. And then worms is where basically it can propagate automatically once it starts. And so that's also very dangerous. We actually seen one that's called WannaCry, which is a ransomware that was also a worm that was spreading like wildfire back. I think it was in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And it was able to take advantage of some exploits that some nation state hackers, hacking groups like the NSA, CIA got leaked. And it didn't take long for the ransomware gangs to weaponize that, and it just started going like wildfire. So all very dangerous stuff. So we talked about the risks and the threats. So now let's talk about some of the common security controls here. And these common security controls together is what makes your security posture. And the common ones that we typically see, and I would hope you all have at least heard at one point or another, is antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-malware. Some of the next generation antivirus stuff is called EDR, stands for Endpoint Detection and Response, really good stuff. Firewalls, intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, also known as IDS or IPS, patching and updating, encryption, logging, monitoring, and alerting, multi-factor authentication, such as MFA or 2FA's abbreviations for that, role-based access control or RBAC, very important, separation of duty, least privilege, need to know, that kind of stuff falls there. Zero trust, segmentation, and then the physical security stuff like locks, motion sensors, lights, badges, and CCTV, and like DVRs and stuff. And really what this all comes down to is one, as long as you can do one of these, that's better than none. If you can do some of these, that's better than one. But all of these are definitely better than some, but there's more, and that's where the honey and sand comes in, and we'll talk about that. And so don't be like the picture here in the background. If you can see it, it is a Cheeto as a lock. So if you're doing one or some of these things, it is essentially a Cheeto holding your door closed. So let's not do that. And here's why. The common security controls are not enough. We have a lot of different things out there that are going to target your business and your personal life as well. And it starts with like the 0 day. And for those of you that are not familiar with 0 day is a terminology used to describe when an exploit, a vulnerability has been discovered, but it hasn't been communicated to the vendor. And so there's no actual patch available for it yet. And so because of that, hackers are able to abuse that, and they actually sell for a lot of money on the dark web. And like I said earlier, nation states like to hoard these because it makes their jobs easier when they're breaking into high value targets. But the risk of a 0 day is even if you have all the best security controls in the world, cannot necessarily stop a 0 day. And so because of that, you have to have processes in place. You have to be monitoring everything and looking for indicators of compromise and indicators of attack. The other thing that makes this challenging is what we call FUD, fully undetected. And this is where you've got a custom payload like a malware or some type of executable. It could be a document, it could be an Excel, an image, a program, you name it. And if it's got a backdoor in it, but they've figured out a way to make it so detection controls can't see it, which we'll talk more about that when we get into the sandboxing of what this all means. But that is one way that they can go undetected. With encrypted channels, the command and control, the beaconing out, the data exfiltration is very hard to pick up because it's all encrypted. And so you have to be able to have architecture in place to intercept encrypted channels and decrypt it to inspect the traffic and re-encrypt it on the way out. That can be very expensive. It requires a lot of tools and capabilities. And with remote work after COVID, with folks working remotely, it makes it even harder to pull that kind of stuff off. And then there's always the insider threat as well. We touched on this briefly earlier, but this is where your folks do bad stuff, whether it's mistakenly or on purpose, whether one of your competitors was able to get one of their guys hired into your firm to steal secrets, or to just simply listen in and let them know kind of what's going on, what are the business tactics you guys are using, or whatever the case is. So insider threats is also another concern, especially because insiders have the permissions and the access to access the data and the servers. And so it makes detecting them much more difficult. And then finally is the leaked credentials. And this is where you guys are using your passwords over and over again, not just on work stuff, but elsewhere. And elsewhere can get hacked like it always does. And those credentials get leaked on the dark web. And then a hacker has those credentials. And if you're using those credentials anywhere else, they're able to simply log in as you, which is also a very big problem. And that's where having like multi-factor authentication in place will definitely help cut back some of that risk. So let's talk briefly about one of the 0 days recently that came out. So when I was creating this slide, this was one of the newest things that was out. So what you're looking at here is on the right-hand side was, I believe this was a tweet that a security firm published. On the left-hand side is the actual link to GitHub. So anyone with this link can go and download this tool. It's called OS Ripper. It targets Macs, OS X specifically, and it allows an attacker to create a backdoor that's fully undetected. So that FUD, like we talked about. And what you're seeing on the right-hand side, like toward the bottom, where it says antiscan.me, you can see detection 0/26. That basically means out of 26 endpoint protection programs, antivirus, none of them found this as a problem, which is very concerning. And so this is just one example of thousands of tools that are publicly accessible to folks that know how to do Google searches to try to find things that can help aid in their attacks. So now we've talked a lot about we've talked a lot about the applications, the exploits, and now we're going to talk about passwords. And so with passwords, there's a right way and a wrong way to do passwords. And unfortunately, sometimes with certain applications and like vendors and tools, they force you into a certain pattern. And sometimes those patterns are not ideal. And I'll give you an example here. So this is a chart that shows how long it takes a hacker to brute force your password. Now, a brute force is basically a hacker attempting to guess your password. And with the power of computers today, thanks to Bitcoin mining and all that other stuff, crypto mining, these systems can be used to target, to break into accounts. And what you're looking at here is a chart that shows how long it would take a hacker to break into your password based on the complexity and length of it. And so on the left-hand side, where you've got number of characters, so that's how long your password is. And as you can see, if you have a 12-character password, but that password's only numbers, it will take them literally 2 seconds to break and guess your password. Whereas if it was 18 characters, but all numbers, it would take them 3 weeks of nonstops. Now, there are a couple additional controls that can be implemented here, such as if after every 5 failed attempts, the account gets locked out for like 5 minutes or even just 1 minute. That would mess these numbers up big time. It would slow them down. Again, this is based on if there's no controls stopping your account from being locked out. And as you add just simply lowercase letters, since there's more lowercase letters than numbers, you can see that it does take a little longer. So you could have a very secure password if it's just lowercase letters, providing that you've got 18 of them. It'd take them 2 million years to crack that. And as you start adding more complexity, obviously it starts going up. So there's 4 possibilities when you make a password. There's a number, there's a lowercase, there's an uppercase, and then there's a symbol. And ideally, we like to see all 4 of those being used. and at least 16 characters or longer. And so you can see if you use all 4 and 16 characters, you're looking at 92 billion years before your password's cracked. And I would assume within that time frame, you'd change your password at least once, right? So do keep that in mind. This is why we rotate passwords. It wasn't that long ago that it was common to have at least 8-character passwords. And you can see if you had an 8-character password with all 4 possibilities, it would take them 39 minutes to figure it out. And even if you add just a couple more characters, such as, let's say it's 10, that would take 5 months. But if your password doesn't expire for 6 months, for example, that would be a problem, because a hacker could simply guess for 5 months straight, guess it, and then you'd have 1 more month before you'd be changing it per policy. So keep that in mind when you design your password policies. And really what all this comes back to is when your passwords are weak and they get compromised, or there's malware that gets on your system, ultimately hackers will get access to your business and your personal contacts, like your browser history and your passwords, and all of the sensitive information that you do not want to get exposed. So this is why we end up having these type of security controls to prevent that kind of stuff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to show a quick video. Again, this video will show exactly what it looks like from the hacker's perspective of when a hacker is able to successfully get a malicious payload sent. So this is going to be a Word document sent to a victim. The victim's on the right-hand side of the screen, the hacker's on the left. And with that, let me go ahead and make this full screen, make sure you guys can hear the audio, and we'll get this started. And we'll be right back after this video. This video will demonstrate how easy it is for a hacker to gain access to a computer in its network. Here you see 2 computers. The computer on the left side is a Linux computer controlled by a hacker, and the computer on the right is our targeted victim. As you can see here on the victim side, the green check marks show that this computer is up to date with the latest version of antivirus, Office 2021, and Windows 10 Professional version 21H2. In this scenario, I've created a Microsoft Word document that contains malicious code to infect the victim's computer network. This is called a Trojan horse. Trojans can come in all forms, such as Excel documents, PDF files, programs, games, and even images. The hacker has already emailed this document to the victim. We'll go ahead and open it now. When the victim opens up the Word document from the email, they'll have no idea that they were just infected. However, take a look at the screen on the left-hand side. You can see that the hacker was granted instant access. You'll also notice by the green check marks that this Word document has gone fully undetected as a problem by the antivirus software. Let's demonstrate a few things that a hacker can do by running a few commands. At this point, the hacker is able to run any command on the victim's computer as if they were sitting right at it. As an example, the hacker lists all the files located in the victim's documents folder. The hacker finds an interesting file named important.txt and decides to open it. You can see the content inside the file that is displayed on the left matches what's on the victim side, demonstrating the hacker has full access to the victim's computer. Now the hacker is going to run a long list of commands to accomplish their objective. In this case, if the computer restarts or gets the connection dropped for whatever reason, the hacker runs a list of commands to backdoor Google Chrome that grants access to the attacker every time Google Chrome is launched. From here, the hacker has control over the entire computer and the network it's connected to. The hacker can now access and steal sensitive business and personal information like banking details, app passwords, emails, messages, social media, web browser search history, documents, and pictures. They'll also be able to control the camera and microphone, along with detecting keystrokes as the victim types. Even worse, they'll be able to hack anyone and anything else connected to the network, such as servers, routers, other computers, and all the contacts in your emails, your digital phone books, and social media accounts to target employees, coworkers, vendors, clients, friends, and even family members. Also note, if this document is opened on a cell phone or tablet, the results are the same: full access and control of that device. This is especially concerning for companies that have multiple remote workers that rely on exchange of information for chatting, invoicing, bidding, scopes of work, as an example. With this type of control, a hacker can truly damage the operations, finances, and reputation of a company. They can also set the victim up for legal issues. You can see the hacker was able to launch the ransomware attacks and encrypt all the victim's files. Here you can see what an encrypted file looks like. This was the same file that we had opened earlier. A ransomware note is also left behind explaining what happened and what steps to pay the ransom. If this was a real ransomware, you could expect to pay anything from one Bitcoin, worth tens of thousands of dollars, to multiple Bitcoins worth hundreds of thousands to even millions. Next, let's open the backdoor Chrome demonstrating persistent connections to the victim. As you can see, another connection is made back to the hacker on the left-hand side when Google Chrome was launched. This backdoor strategy could have been applied to any and all other programs and is just one way a hacker can maintain persistence in the computer. All is not doom and gloom, though. You can offset these risks by improving your company's network security and overall cyber hygiene. Lockhart is a cybersecurity firm protecting businesses from all types of risks associated with cyber threats, including ransomware attacks and Trojans like what you just witnessed today. We develop preventative strategies against data theft, financial loss, and reputation damage. I hope you enjoyed this simulation as much as I did creating it. Till next time, thank you for watching. This video will demonstrate that off. There we go. All right. So as you can see, that's how easy it is for a hacker to get access to your system and maintain their connection. And like the video alluded to, not all is doom and gloom. And we're going to share now some of the tactics and techniques that you can use today to help offset some of these risks. And that's where we're going to talk about the honey and sand part. So if you stuck around this long, we're going to talk about what this is all about. And specifically what SAND stands for is sandboxing. Honey stands for honey tokens, honey pots, and honey nets. So first, we're going to talk about the sandbox. So sandbox is used to determine if something is bad. And there's multiple types of sandboxes. There's a sandbox designed specifically for file detonation and analysis. And there's sandboxes designed for assessing IP addresses, URLs, and to actually go out to websites and check for bad things. Now, there is some caveats, though, because advanced malware can detect if it's running in a sandbox, which makes it really difficult to get an accurate assessment. And it could be a false sense of security if nothing detects it. So there are additional steps that have to be taken. And here are some of the sandbox tools. We'll call this DIY. You can go out and do it yourself. On the left-hand side, they consist of programs or web applications for you to scan files. Now, do keep in mind, this is a public sandbox. So if the file in question does contain sensitive information, then you're not going to want to submit it up there, because vendors, antivirus vendors, can pull down samples. Malware authors and malware analysts, information security analysts, they can pull down the sample as well to help them build additional tools. And so that means if you do upload something with sensitive information in it, that in itself could be a data breach. So be mindful of that. Now, alternatively, you can build your own sandbox. It's a little bit more advanced, but on the right-hand side where it says application, specifically Cuckoo Sandbox is something that can detonate files on your own servers. And obviously that would require either extensive knowledge on your side or an IT department, or this is something we can do. But basically this allows you to safely submit files to have analysis done on them without the worry of other unauthorized folks getting access to said files. And then in the middle is some of the links that you can use for scanning URLs and IP addresses in websites. One that I like is the scamvoid.net for a website that you've never heard before or you receive in an email. You can go and punch it in the scamvoid.net, and it will give you a bunch of information like the reputation on the website, where it's hosted at, where it's at. So is the site in US? Is it in Russia? Is it China? How old the domain is? Is it just bought brand new, 1 day old, or has it been around for 20 years? All of that is very important information when making a determination if it's a legitimate safe site or if it's a scam site. So now we're going to demonstrate some of these sandboxes that we're talking about. So first thing is, let's take a look at what VirusTotal looks like. So here I've opened up the VirusTotal website, and this is where you can simply choose a file to upload, or if there was a URL you want to scan, you can type it in here. Or if you want to do a search to see if there's something that's known previously, you can search it here as well. And then if there's something historically that's found, you can also tell it to reanalyze the file or URL on demand. So you get an up-to-date picture, because what can happen is things that may have not been a problem at one point in time in history could be a problem now, especially when a legitimate safe website gets hacked and then a hacker starts putting up ransomware and malware on the website for drive-by downloads. Now all of a sudden that legitimate safe site becomes a problem. And this is one way to detect that. So the first thing that we're going to show you is what it actually looks like when you upload something or find something that's bad. And so in this case, I have uploaded a known malicious file. This file, as you can see, was scanned by 71 vendors, and 46 of these vendors actually found it as a problem. So we can see that this was scanned a month ago, and it'll be very interesting to rescan this here in just a second to see if this number changes. But you can see what these vendors, on the left-hand side is the vendor name. So for example, here's Avast. Over here is like Bitdefender, AVG, CrowdStrike. They all flagged it. A lot of them calling it a Trojan. Malwarebytes, Microsoft, McAfee, they all flagged this. But as you can see, some of these did not find it, such as CyberReason, F-Secure, Dr. Web, even Sentinel-1, which is surprising. So that being said, let's go ahead and just reanalyze this. So again, it was scanned a month ago. By clicking this button up here, it's going to reanalyze the file. So we had 46 detection last time, and it was over a month ago. And I would expect that more vendors now should see this as a problem. Because again, going back to that sharing mentality, whenever things get uploaded here, vendors want to try to compete. And so chances are some of those that did not see it as a problem, hopefully now sees it as a problem. And so we'll see what the final number is. And again, you can do this with any file. There is a limitation though. I guess I shouldn't say in any file. It does say there is a file size limitation. I believe it's 128 megs. When I first started using this, it was actually 16 megs, and I've watched it grow ever since. Google actually bought VirusTotal, so this is a Google tool for those of you who are interested in who owns this. But again, you don't want to upload sensitive information here. You want to build this yourself internally using Cuckoo. All right, it's almost done. It's at 61, and this number will also vary from time to time. Google's always creating new vendor assessment systems to scan against, and then some get taken down for maintenance or for whatever reason. So don't be surprised if sometimes there's more or less that's scanned compared to before. So this should be almost done, and we'll take a look at the results here in just a second. And while that's scanning, we can go on. Okay, it looks like it's been interesting. It actually had one less, and it could be because we didn't have as many scan it. So before it was 71, now only 64 scanned it. But you can see again a lot of vendors here saying this is a problem, and Sentinel-1, for example, still says it's not a problem. So the next step here is scanning a URL. So in this case, we just scanned locker.it. It's one of our websites. In this case, there was 90 different threat feeds that was checking or blacklist. And in this case, obviously, they're all saying it's safe and clean, which is great. Another example, though, is URL Void. This is another tool that I like to use as well. Just like before, it shows how long ago the scan was done, you can rescan it. This case, on this tool, 44 blacklists are checked. It shows how old the domain is and where it's located. And then you can get more information on the blacklist down here. And if there was something that was a problem, you can click here to get more details on that. And it'll tell you it's spam, it's phishing, it's malware, ransomware, whatever the case is of why it ended up on that blacklist. And then finally, you can scan for IP addresses. Now, this is a very interesting situation here, and I'm glad this did flag the way it did, because this shows some of the limitations and of sandboxing, and that is, in this case, the IP address we use is 8.8.8.8. That is a DNS server that belongs to Google. This is a perfectly safe IP address. However, one of the vendors flagged it as malware. And so you do have to kind of take it from a grain of salt when you do look at this stuff. But I would imagine the reason why that one probably flagged it as malware is because they've probably seen malware hard-coded to check out, like beacon out to Google's DNS server to check to see if like the box is online or not. I've seen that happen a lot, and I would assume maybe that's why. But again, that is a huge false positive there. So a couple of good examples there. Here's a couple additional tools in the links. There's also an IP void. So we went to a URL void. There's an IP void as well. And then Pulse Dive, which is another great tool that I like to use. And it allows you to get like a screenshot of the website as well. Due to time, we're not going to be able to dive into that one specifically. But again, here's some links to some tools that you'll be able to use. All right, so some of the sandbox limitations, which I touched on earlier. So the main limitations here is around the fact that it's a point in time assessment for just that particular situation. So for example, if malware was coded in such a way that it only does the bad things, like opens up the back door after 5 minutes of running, Sandbox is not going to catch that. Or it might only run after it gets to midnight. Or if it's a game, it might open up the back door at level 3. And there's no way the Sandbox is going to be able to play the game to get to level 3. Or the Sandbox isn't going to run it again at midnight. Or if it's a keylogger or monitoring, it may wait until you type in the word thanks. Like I've seen so many different strategies used to circumvent sandboxes. And so unfortunately, there is no silver bullet here. And so it's just important to know that all of this together is what's needed to have a well-rounded security posture. Not one tool can save you. So let's talk about honeypots. So a honeypot is basically a vulnerable system, a vulnerable application designed to entice a hacker to go after. A honey token is used as a lure or a decoy. Here's some common honey tokens and honeypots that are out there. Again, a DIY situation that you can use. We'll do a demonstration of a honey token here in just a second. But basically, going back to what you do with the honeypot is you want to entice an attacker to go after it. So they're not attacking your production network and going after your production data. They're going after this vulnerable system. And then ideally your security team is monitoring and has alerts. So then they can see exactly how are they attacking this thing? How do they get in? What are they doing? And then they can leverage that information to then build up better detection and prevention controls, to then block them. So ideally you don't want this honeypot on the same network as your production network, because at that point they could move laterally. But if it's internally, then you already know someone's on the network, and that in and of itself is a problem. Now, if you start chaining a bunch of this stuff together, we call that a honey net. And so this is basically a designated network that is designed to have multiple combinations of type of honeypots and honey tokens all together. Now, just like the sandboxes, there are some limitations that you should be aware of as well. And so these limitations really consist of if, for example, a honey token is copied to an offline system and it's open, you're not going to get an alert about it. So do be mindful of that. But best practices would be when you make the honey token, you should name it something that would entice an attacker to go after and open, such as make an Excel file called passwords, or a Word document called passwords. You're going to want to put that file in directories that folks normally shouldn't have access to, such as your admin and root directories or on file shares or on other areas on servers. Because if someone were to open that, they've already gotten access to areas they shouldn't have access to. And then the honey token will beacon out the public IP address of who opened it, the timestamp of when it was opened, and give you a little bit of insight. So again, it acts as more of like a tripwire or a booby trap within your environment. Another type of honey token is a honey token account. And it's a fake user that looks normal, but it appears desirable to an attacker. And this user can be in like Active Directory or AAD, and it just sits there. And there's parameters that you can give it without getting too detailed in the weeds and the nuances around it. There are ways to make an attacker that's in your environment looking to compromise an account to go after that one opposed to other ones. And if that user now all of a sudden's logging into things, that is a huge red flag. No one should be using this account. Therefore, someone is in the account or in your environment using accounts you shouldn't be using. All right, let's demonstrate the honey token. So this is going to be a two-part process. The first part is we have to build the honey token. So this is the website. You can click down. You can see there's a bunch of different types of honey tokens you can use. We're going to go ahead and just use Excel for now. We're going to type the email address you want the alert to go to, and we're going to give it a reminder. So when it does fire, you've got some context here. So we're going to say this is an example for Florida bar. All right, we're going to say create it, and then we're going to download it. And now in our downloads folder, we've got this honey token. It's a random name. So now let's go ahead and call it passwords. Okay. Now we are going to go to the mailbox that we are using for this to alert to come in, and we're going to double click on it and watch what happens. I've got multiple monitors, and it opened up in a different screen of mine. So let me open that again here. There it goes. All right. So you can see we got an alert. All right. And if we open up the alert, we got some information. We can see, for example, the IP address that opened it. We've got the reminder. We can see the date and timestamp. We can click here to manage this token as well. This is important because when you start having a bunch of these, there's a lot of things that can get very messy. And so in this case, you can see that we got a history. I actually clicked on it a couple times, and it fired all 3 times that I clicked on it. Let's do something fun. Let's go back to VirusTotal, and let's actually upload this thing to VirusTotal and see firsthand what happens. All right, we're going to confirm the upload. And so now what's going to happen, we're going to see what vendors say about this. And then we're going to watch the history of this thing start firing off. And so as it's scanning, we're going to start receiving more alerts here once it's done. All right, so in this case, 3 vendors flagged this as a Trojan, which makes sense because it is technically beaconing out. So that's good that it's seen that. But let's go and look at the history here. Let's refresh this. Now all of a sudden you can see it opened up a bunch more. And if we zoom out, now all of a sudden we can see there is a data center here in Nebraska, it looks like, that accessed our stuff. And if we open this up, you can see, all right, so that's for me. That's also me. That's for me. Here we go. This is the first one. So you can see this was from Google. Like I said, Google owns VirusTotal. And so normally when I've done this test, there's 3 different facilities that Google uses. In this case, there's only 2, so they might be down for maintenance or whatever the case is. We should also explain why only 57 vendors scanned it opposed to the 70-some that we normally see before. All right, so how does all of this tie together? And like I said, all of this stuff here is what we showed you can do on your own. Obviously, there's a lot of technical know-how and concerns, but again, this can very well be a DIY, do it yourself. Or you can hire folks such as Lockard to do it for you. Or if you have your own security folks or your own IT folks, you can let them know about this. Ideally, though, they should already know about this type of stuff. And if they don't, then that could be a gap and there might be stuff missed. And so how this all boils together is what we call defense in depth, because again, not one of these in and of itself can protect you. So we're going to talk about And each of these we could spend an hour on, and we don't have that kind of time. So we're going to quickly go through this stuff. And again, if you have questions or concerns, we can talk about this later. Feel free to drop it in the chat. So high level here, we're talking about the blue ring represents policies and procedures. The green represents physical security. The yellow represents network security. The orange is endpoint security, and red is data security. And all these rings here represents that. And the gold bars represents your crown jewels. And crown jewels in this case would be your classified data. It could be PII, PHI, SSN, CCs, or IPs. And I got all that listed out here. So your personally identifiable information, your credit cards, social security numbers, intellectual property. This could also be classified networks or classified systems and devices, email accounts, SaaS accounts, social media accounts. All of that could very well be deemed your crown jewels. So on the first ring of defense in depth is your policies and procedures. So this is where we talk about like risk management, incident response management, supply chain management, audit and assessments, training and awareness. So making sure your employees are being phished and have training showing them how phishing is bad and what to do to look out for it. Physical security. This is the next ring down. This is where we're talking like ID cards, badges, fences and gates, CCTV, locks, safes, alarms, motion sensors. That's all part of physical security, which is all very important because if a hacker physically gets access to your servers or your computers, all bets are off. They can simply plug in malware via USB stick. They can walk out with the computer in their hand, bunch of bad stuff. So physical security, equally important. Network security. This is where your network firewalls live. This is a layer that you can do your sandboxing at. So you can have a next generation firewall that will intercept payloads such as documents and pictures and images and files, and they can detonate those in sandboxes in real time. This is where you have baseline hardening. You can do at this level your IDS, IPS, intrusion detection preventions. Also, your honeypots can live here as well. This is also where your VPNs live. You should be monitoring and alerting on your honey tokens here as well. Vulnerability assessment, cloud security, all lives here. Endpoint security is next. Your endpoint security should consist of baseline hardening. So right out of the box, there's a bunch of services and applications that are unneeded, that are vulnerable. They should be removed. Lock down your systems. That's a baseline hardening. Application whitelisting is another, or allow listing is another form of only allowing programs and executables to run that are on a list that is allowed to run. Having write and read protections in place. Making sure you're patching the operating system and all those third-party applications as well, such as Adobe, Java, Flash, Chrome, Firefox, just to name a few of the third-party applications. You have to keep those up to date because all of the other controls that we've talked about in the world can't stop you if your third-party applications are outdated, going back to those zero-day exploits. This is where you'll also have your endpoint detection response tools, your EDR, next-generation antivirus programs. And you should not be logging in with your admin or root account. You should have least privilege implemented. So you do privilege escalation as needed. You shouldn't be checking your email or browsing the internet with your root or admin account. And here's where you can also be doing alerting for your honey tokens as well. And then finally is the application and data security part. This is where your data should have some type of classification. This should be concerns of where your privacy. You should be using encryption, data integrity, make sure nothing's changed. This is where you implement your rollback access controls. So going back to need to know, least privilege, you should be auditing. You should have logs detailing who's accessing what, from where, and when. Your data retention, how long do you need this data for? Data destruction, how are you going to destroy this data? And are you going to securely destroy it and wipe it completely? The availability of the data, very important. If this data has to be available, how is it going to be available? Could a denial of service take it down? Are you in a cluster, high availability with load balancing, all of that stuff? And then patching, making sure that the tools and the controls and the systems that this data lives on is patching up to date. So I know we covered a lot, probably drinking from off higher hose and a lot of your heads are spinning, and that's okay and understandable. And so to end here, Lockard, we are a MSSP. We're a managed security service provider. And everything that we talked about, we can do for you. And we've partnered with the Florida Bar here to offer a complimentary cybersecurity assessment to all Florida Bar members. So that means if you have a question or you don't know where your posture, your security posture is with your firm or your practice, let us know. Give us a call or shoot us an email. We have a custom email we made just for you guys. floridabar@lockhardsecurity.com. We'll be more than happy to have a conversation, to do a consultation, to ask some tough questions, and put together a report of our recommendations. And again, that's complimentary. And if you do decide to go with our services, we have heavily discounted paid services to all Florida Bar members as well. And our 4 main services that are our team services, we have our Blue Team, which is a 24/7 by 365 team. I've got eyes on monitors, hands on keyboards that are monitoring, responding to alerts, and doing incident response services. We can also extend that to go to patch management, maintaining the operating system patches, third-party patches. We can include threat intelligence as well. So pulling together all of our honeypots. We have multiple honeypots nationwide, and they're being attacked, and we aggregate that attack data, and we can push that into our tools or your tools, providing that they support them. And those tools could be firewalls, antivirus, next generation antivirus, EDR, that kind of stuff, which can help aid in the Blue Team. This also includes vulnerability scanning and response services. So if 0 days, such as what we've seen Log4j, which was back in December, happened, we were all over that and made sure that our customers were not impacted. And then our Purple Team services is designed, if you already have a Blue Team or a security personnel, we can test their capabilities. We can test your tools and your processes by making noise in your environment and seeing if they can be detected. Our Red Team services is our ethical hacking and our penetration testing. So this is where we target your practice as an attacker would. We use the same tactics and techniques that hackers to use. And then finally, our Tiger Team service. This is for our on-prem capabilities. So we will do break-in and entering, lockpicking. We'll implant rogue Wi-Fi and cell towers and other backdoor implants. We'll try to clone badges. So all of this is a part of our Tiger Team. And a lot of times for our advanced customers, we'll layer both Red Team and Tiger Teams and Purple Teams together, all as one. And so you can check out us on our website at lockhardsecurity.com. We've created a custom page for you all as well. So lockhardsecurity.com/Florida-bar to learn more. So with that, that's all I got. Thank you for watching. Do we have any questions?
No questions at the moment, but I am sure we will get many questions at that Florida Bar specific email. Thank you, Nick Lockhart, for presenting this educational cybersecurity webinar and for offering our members a complimentary cybersecurity assessment and discounted services. I really appreciate it, and we'll be posting all of this on legalfuel.com for anyone listening. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the session. As I said earlier, today's webinar has been approved by the Florida Bar's CLE department for 1 hour of General CLE credit, including 1 hour of Technology CLE credit. The course number is 5847. Again, the course number for today's webinar is 5847. You'll need this course number to post credits in your Florida Bar member portal. You may submit questions or comments about today's webinar to Lockhart at floridabar@lockhardsecurity.com or to legalfuel at legalfuel@floridabar.com. Thank you again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.